All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Bob Ritchie, and I'm here to talk to you today about opinions. And opinions are like pipelines in this case. So before we dive in, I'll just start off with a little bit about who I am. So first and foremost, I identify as a software engineer through and through. I believe in the craftsmanship and art form that is software development, and this whole idea of the software factory in and around DevOps is interesting and sensitive subject to me because industrializing art form is kind of an interesting juxtaposition of two ideas. But in that vein, I'm also very passionate about DevOps and really bringing groups of people together around joint beliefs and joint value propositions and joint missions. So building off of that, my obsession with continual learning, this is kind of day in and day out, something I'm very passionate about. So I always lead off with, whenever I'm introducing myself to a group of folks, that anything that you hear me say or do, you can rest assured it's driven by a passion for continual learning. So whether that's my own learning or sharing and teaching with others, any day you learn something new is a good day. Any day you teach someone something new is a great day. And so building off of that and why the name and topic of this talk, that learning has led me to a bag full of opinions. I assume all of you are very aware that everyone has opinions, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but specifically in the software engineering discipline, we're a very opinionated group of folks. And then the other kind of less important or less impressive part about who I am, I'm the Vice President of Software for SAIC, so I get to help out on a lot of different initiatives across a lot of different customers, as well as the company itself, in terms of DevOps journey and embracing some of the challenges in and around that. So diving right in, what are opinions and who has them? Well, everyone knows opinions are like insert whatever you want. We all have them and they all stink. And so I thought it was really funny and kind of pointed towards this topic of conversation today that we'd start out with the definition from Oxford Languages. View or judgment formed about something, not necessarily based on facts or knowledge. And so that's, I highlighted that part in red from the definition. I think it's really important that when we talk about opinions, we understand that they're not necessarily grounded in anything other than a gut feeling or maybe something you saw in a movie one time or heard from a friend. So opinions can form from a lot of different ways. I mentioned right off the top that software engineers specifically are genuinely entrenched in their opinions once they form. It's a human nature thing to identify with the opinions and the opinions that have come from our background and how we were either raised or the folks we hang out with on a day-to-day basis and spend time with. All of these kind of environmental attributes contribute to the opinions that we have. And in software engineering, opinions are very important. There is a vast amount of choice in the art form of software engineering. I'm sure there are in other disciplines, but I can't really wax poetical about the other disciplines of the world. But specifically in software, and what draws most of us to software is how approachable software is, how easy it is to build things and get value out of things. But as a result of that, the ecosystem of building and shipping, and specifically around CICD and DevOps, is really vast. There's so much choice. So without opinions and without being opinionated, we'd be kind of paralyzed. And I think the cliche term is analysis paralysis, right? We'd constantly be evaluating what we should be doing as opposed to actually delivering value. So opinions are really important, but then it's kind of a double-edged sword. And so that's kind of what the focus of today's talk is going to be about, is that double-edged sword. So what about CI/CD pipelines, and why are we talking about them together? Well, we should all have those too. We don't always, it's not every project or every program or every product in the world has invested the appropriate amount of time in CI/CD or in automation in general. But we all, I think it's kind of a commodity or well-known fact that automate everything, software-defined everything has intrinsic value. It's implicitly good to automate everything possible, eliminating human error, increasing repeatability and efficiency, eliminating waste. So, identifying and eliminating waste. These are all things that a real commitment towards automation, specifically in this case around CI/CD, it's incredibly valuable to an organization, especially around a software enterprise organization or a software product organization. what you see here is just a couple of snapshots of some examples. Front and center is Harness in terms of deployment pipelines. So, thanks to Harness for putting this conference on. I definitely, have lots of positive things to say about them, especially in this context of opinions and how to balance those in regards to DevOps and CICD in particular. Bottom center is Drone, for those who aren't familiar. So Drone is, a wonderful CI/CD tool as well. And as Harness kind of bridges out into the CI side of things and not just, continual deployment, it'll be really interesting to see how kind of the principles of Harness and what the founding principles of Harness and the platform are, and how those bleed into really positive benefits on the CI side as well. But other popular tools out there in the ecosystem, there's some folks who do it as simple as on the right-hand side using Go task files. Some use tools like CodeFresh. Obviously, Jenkins and GitLab are really popular in the ecosystem as well. So really understanding that there's a lot of choice you have in your CI/CD pipelines. The kind of takeaway from this slide is you should have made a choice. You should have some pipelines. But even once you've made a choice, right? If I choose Jenkins, or if I choose GitLab, or I choose Drone, or I choose CodeFresh, there's even more choice baked in at the actual individual levels of your pipelines. And so that's what we're going to talk about. So what are the kind of confluence of opinions, a lot of choice involved in software development and opinions, married up, juxtaposed up with the amount of choice and in the world of pipelines and all the choices therein, from a tooling standpoint to a standard standpoint, what this can mean to the software enterprise. So there's, the really popular graphic on the right-hand side, just to kind of foot stomp in the technology landscape, how kind of entrenched we are in our opinions. Is a funny little comic about, the pronunciation of kubectl, and even probably now me saying it kubectl has invoked some sort of a passionate response in all of you listening in on this conversation. So having those entrenched opinions can lead to what we see on the left, where I affectionately refer to this as, I've been a part of a few organizations in the past dealing with this, the pipeline wars or platform wars, whatever you want to call it, where you have incredibly talented DevOps engineers, full stack software engineers, whatever label you want to slap on them, all very gifted and able to develop full end-to-end automation and deployment of value into production and into the hands of your end users. But instead of focusing that energy and instead of focusing that talent on delivering features to mission, delivering features to the product and the end users, they infight amongst themselves of whose pipeline's better and why. Can be language choice, it can be syntax choice. Even when everyone agrees on a specific technology around pipelines, it can get really hairy around DSL built on top of those technologies. If you've ever had the pleasure of being a part of a team of chef DevOps engineers, or an enterprise that's born of chef DevOps engineers, and then everything has to be Ruby or else, it can get kind of hairy. And then instead of the teams delivering that value, you end up with that picture in the center there, where your customers are kind of constantly disappointed, your product owners are constantly worried and missing deadlines on shipping value, because that superlative talent is unfortunately not focused on anything more to the value proposition of your business model. They're focusing instead on infighting and whose opinion is better, whose opinion is right. So there are a couple ways that enterprises can combat this, we're going to talk about two kind of polar opposites, extremes here. This is the to each their own extreme, which can lead to varied successes. And I apologize for my poor illustration skills here and my affinity towards Oregon Trail. So for anyone who didn't play that in your elementary school classrooms, I apologize for your poor elementary school upbringing, but Oregon Trail was an amazing game, and you could get varied outcomes. It's not unlike what can happen when you let your organization have too much freedom, too much choice, or too much opinion in how they're going to go about realizing CICD and other DevOps components, but really the focus of today is around CICD in the enterprise and in the ecosystem. So some may make it all the way to Oregon, some die of dysentery or cholera or whatever, or your wheels fall off your wagon, for those familiar with the game, and some get into a perpetual state of questioning themselves and never end up in any destination. So they get in this infinite game with themselves, never shipping any value, never actually completing. And so this is one extreme where you really want to avoid letting the opinions kind of take over, or I guess another popular cliche, since I'm full of those, is letting the inmates run the asylum. So from an enterprise standpoint, really getting to a standard of consistent quality and consistent efficiency and delivery, you cannot get there from a let everyone do their own thing mentality. So that's one end of the kind of pendulum swing. Swinging back to the other way, one pipeline to rule them all. So this does work at small scale, I'll say. I've seen this work on enterprises where they're narrowly focused on a particular technology and a particular delivery mechanism, where they have one CI pipeline, has all their gates built in. They have all requirements for any program or any feature that's going to be developed needs to pass through all these gates. Everyone in the organization needs to conform to these gates. And the kind of cliche here is one ring to rule them all, right? The challenge here, and you see kind of poorly depicted in the bottom left here, is that inevitably, as you start to scale, someone or groups of someones are going to start to feel left out, in that the one pipeline to rule them all was not meant for every technology. So you're starting to lose out on some of the mentality of the right tool for the right job. The common cliche in the bottom right here, obviously, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I guess in this case, when you're a wrench, everything looks like a screw in this picture. So really getting to that kind of other extreme, where you have just one enterprise standard, one pipeline, one way to do CI, one way to do CD, is also not really the right way to scale for an enterprise, because what ends up happening is you'll drive away superlative talent that really could benefit, supporting different technologies. You'll drive away, some of the mission value and quality that could come from maybe using Python or Go when all you have is a Spring Boot pipeline, and you say, thou shalt use Spring Boot. There's going to be an entire ecosystem of really talented developers out there, and really, purpose-built solutions out there that you're going to miss out on in that context, or getting down to that uniformity or that conformity, and really killing innovation at that. So that's another extreme to really try to avoid, kind of the opposite end of everyone going their own way. So how do we combat this? Well, one kind of key piece of combating this sort of opinion war, or embracing the fact that you do have opinions to deal with, is understanding that this is a real world we operate in, and that everyone can't be extremely happy and everyone can't win when there's competing opinions. And for anyone out there who's married or in a long-term relationship, can understand how important it is to be able to strike a balance pragmatically. And we'll talk more about some quantitative and objective ways to do that in a second here. But so really embracing the fact that not everyone will win is important, and it's difficult for an enterprise to do, right? Because we have superlative engineers that are really members of our family, right? If your organization is like mine, and your superlative talent and all your talent is really cultivated in a way where we respect and honor each other, it's difficult to ever let somebody down, and it can be a real letdown for a superlative engineer or a superlative team to understand that what they've built might not be the right answer for everyone, or might not be the right answer even for the problem they're trying to go after. But there's a respectful way to have those conversations, and an objective way to have those conversations, without saying, something controversial like curly braces belong on the same line or the next line, or whichever side of or tabs for spaces, I guess, is the other fun, really cliche around syntax there. Embracing the fact that superlative engineers do exist and superlative teams do exist. And I think, looking back at some talks that Steve Jobs did a long time ago around the way superlative engineers can affect an enterprise, it's not a 2x or 3x when it comes to software. We're looking at 10x, 50x, 100x software engineers when we're talking about superlative. So the importance to keep them happy to an enterprise success is, exactly that multiplier, right? Driving away a couple of 100x software engineers can leave a void in an enterprise that is not going to be filled. You can't hire 50 average engineers to make up for one superlative engineer that you've thrown away. And then the other kind of aspect that Jobs noted is the superlative engineers really congregate towards each other within an enterprise. And so those really gifted men and women who work in an enterprise together and are drawn to each other because of their superlative skill set, being able to leverage that talent amongst an organization and really focus them in on the top priorities of your enterprise but then have their kind of skills spread across in an approachable way to the rest of your enterprise is really a challenge, but also an operational reality. And so what you really want to look for as far as how you scale that kind of superlative talent and team is solutions that are approachable. And so Jeffrey Moore, this is another probably cliche term at this point, but crossing the chasm and getting that superlative left-hand side of innovators and early adopters and really getting the solutions built there on the early market over to the early adopters, early majority, late majority, and even to the laggards of the enterprise and organization such that they're able to adopt at scale. So embracing that reality is really important to really scaling out your CI/CD choices. Another really important factor to take into consideration is keeping it simple. So I said already, the right tool for the right job mentality, that's a really imperative philosophy to embrace, that there is no silver bullet. There is no best language in software development. There is no best pipeline. There is no best deployment technique. There's not one that beats any others. I know it'd be really popular and trendy right now to say, I don't know what the right answer is as long as it's Kubernetes and Helm and GitOps. Those are wonderful techniques, right, to adopt. And specifically about them, each one of those, each components of those are very simple in their, as long as you focus them in on what they're meant to do. However, it's not a one size fits all. It doesn't always meet the right needs. I think someone in a previous talk I'd seen highlighted the importance of density when you're talking about Kubernetes in terms of an operational platform. If your organization is not going to have the density needed to get value out of Kubernetes, it might not be the right answer for your organization. And so having that be the only answer, or having that be the only option for your developers can really over-constrain them and drive away some talent. The other piece is having, we talked about the one pipeline to rule them all. A tendency in those, when they say, okay, here's this one pipeline, it's tailor-made for Spring Boot microservices deployed in AWS or deployed in Kubernetes, and here's the way it's going to work, and here's the way you conform to it. And then someone comes along and shows a really valid use case to say develop a Golang microservice or Python because we're doing maybe environmental or geospatial processing. There'd be a tendency in a one pipeline to rule them all organization to take that really simple Spring Boot pipeline and branch it and fork it and split it up so that it can handle either Spring Boot or Python. And then later it'll be extended to Spring Boot, Python, or Golang. And then maybe it's going to be Helm versus ECS versus Lambda as far as deployment options. And so over time, you can move from that very simple pipeline, easy to approach, easy to adopt and understand, over to the complex, all around this kind of false anti-pattern of having one and only one pipeline, where it would have been it might not have been as easy, but it would have been a lot simpler to establish pipelines that are bespoke to the specific archetypes in your enterprise and in your organization. And so that's really an important takeaway. One of my favorite talks on the subject was done by Rich Hickey called Simple Made Easy. He introduced some terms that I had never heard before in that talk. I definitely suggest going out and watching that if you haven't seen it before. And then we can have a conversation later about what the term complecting means. It was a word I had never heard before Rich gave that talk, but a really wonderful talk around the difference between something that's simple and something that's easy. And when you are talking about adopting CI/CD at scale for your enterprise and other DevOps, continuous monitoring, continuous experimentation, continuous security and observability, these are things that you really want to keep simple and make sure that you're doing kind of the Unix principle of do one thing and do it well, and make those pieces composable for your enterprise instead of building out this complex mess on the right-hand side. To that effect, the things you build need to be discoverable in your enterprise. So you need to have a mechanism by which you register these simple solutions so that they can be discovered by the enterprise. You don't have a bunch of people going out and reinventing the wheel, but then you also have a one-stop shop to identify gaps, such that when that organization comes along and says, I have this really great use case for I need a NumPy Python-based pipeline to deploy this microservice or this Lambda into production, and you can go to this place, this registry, and discover and say, I don't have a pipeline for that. Let me include that in the scope of what's needed to get this into production. And then the next one who comes along that does something similar is able to discover that and use it. And so when we're talking about Harness, that's really what drew me originally to Harness, and I'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. And so we earlier in the talk, I talked about value-based, or I talked about the absence or difficulty with having I guess, compromised conversations around and eliminating subjective opinions, right? The whole topic of the conversation is on opinions. And how do you combat that in an objective way while you're still honoring the fact that all opinions are valid, right? And one way of doing that, this little cartoon from Timo Elliott here on the right, is you really focused on facts and data. So there's been a lot of kind of standardization on some of the DORA metrics that really help kind of have an objective conversation. If one pipeline objectively leads you to smaller mean time between failures, improved, increased delivery frequency, improved or shortened value feature lead time, et cetera, it objectively is better for your enterprise or for your organization. Does that mean that one technology is better or not? No, but for your enterprise, it might be, or for your one product area, it might be. So really getting those conversations down objectively helps you kind of have a rational conversation with hyper-opinionated or groups of people. And so one thing that we've already established, right, that the software engineering community is hyper-opinionated. We are also very logical and rational people. And so if you have a conversation, objectively, at least you'll be able to leave feelings out of the conversation. And in many cases, you get to a point where really strong superlative engineers are able to understand at an enterprise level why their opinion may or may not have been selected and contribute to the greater good of the company, because the other kind of piece of this is value-based decisions. So a personal hero of mine is Simon Sinek. I really recommend going and watching anything he's ever said or reading anything he's ever written. Starting with why, really grounding your organization on your beliefs and your principles allows you to make not only data-driven decisions, but value-based decisions. So it lets you establish authentically what you value over another. So if you look back at Agile Manifesto, everything on the left-hand side, right, famously didn't mean they didn't value the things on the right. They just value the things on the left more. And so it's the same for adopting CICD at scale for your enterprise. Establishing those kind of guiding principles and philosophical beliefs for your organization paired with data helps you have taken a very hyper opinionated group and a very sensitive conversation and turning it into a very objective and rational conversation and can really drive value for your organization. Another really great thing, this is from 2019 State of DevOps report, similar to the published DORA metrics, but establishing a community of practice. There's no better way I've found than bringing people together and honoring each other's opinions and differences of opinions than doing it in an open forum where we all agree on why we're doing it, right? So communities of practice, really organizing around those ideas, so you could do it as broadly as DevOps for your enterprise, or you could do it around a specific problem or short-lived problem or challenge that your enterprise is facing. But really getting to this point where you're going to have an organization that agrees to rules of the road up front, has a lower friction for engagement, so really focusing on tools and technologies that help them collaborate. And then the other kind of added benefits of it, and this is again where the continual learning ecosystem shines through, is Daniel Pink's Motivation 3.0 of purpose, autonomy, and mastery. Going back to that anti-pattern of one pipeline to rule them all, you're robbing people of their autonomy and mastery, right? You might get them codified around a purpose, and that's great. But people, especially superlative engineers in my experience, really are drawn to the ability to have some level of autonomy, so some modicum of control. Now, it's not the Wild West on the Oregon Trail like we depicted, but a level of autonomy to own their own destiny, adopt the enterprise pipelines that are available, or identify a gap and develop a new one. But then also the mastery of understanding what's going on, the opportunity to learn and engage with your community, and really grow your opinions. So don't have those opinions be set in stone. Don't have those opinions that you formed maybe in your first few years out of college and your first few jobs. Everyone should, through continual learning, can learn, and their opinions can adapt and grow, and getting to a really strong point of democratization. So in this case, really democratization around cloud competency and CICD is a strong proponent of community of practice. So the one depicted here is the Cloud One community of practice. Is a really enterprise scale DevOps and cloud adoption program that we're proud of at SAIC. but it's just one example, right? So, and getting to those tools that are at play here, from a collaboration standpoint, and also, we talk about from a CICD standpoint. So GitLab's hosted here as a code reuse and sharing perspective. But how are we bridging these at SAIC? So this is really where I as promised, was going to talk about, what are we doing with Harness? Why am I here at a Harness conference talking to you today? And it's really kind of twofold, really embracing two key partnerships we have with both Harness and with HashiCorp from Terraform standpoint, to establish this kind of community model within the organization across all of the customers we support, to get to a level of enterprise adoption and registration of pipelines that are effective in ensuring quality delivery. So I'll say that my engagement with Harness started really narrowly focused on that delivery aspect. The recent acquisition of Drone, or merger of Drone, with Harness, I'm really excited about, because it can expand our aperture and how we think about leveraging Harness in our enterprise, to think about from a CI standpoint as well. But what Harness as a platform has done for us, and is starting to do more and more at enterprise scale for us at SAIC, is create these approachable pipelines that are discoverable, easy to consume, both from our security operations folks that can see in the pipeline how quality is being controlled, how security is being controlled, how adopting and promoting those enterprise pipelines for reuse is driving towards CMMI quality as well as CMMC. So how do those CMMC controls from a government standpoint, how are they fed in through the pipelines in reusable building blocks for building pipelines, without necessarily needing to know Jenkins file DSL or a custom Ruby DSL or a YAML file DSL. And so our engineers are able, the superlatives are able to develop really, really fine-grained and narrowly scoped bespoke pipelines for their engineering purposes. But then when the next time that sort of capability is needed, there's a registry and a shelf of those types of pipelines for the enterprise to go and adopt from, similar to the way we do reusable Terraform modules across our customer base. So those opinions are honored and respected and made available to the enterprise at varying levels. So you're able to leverage your ecosystem of GitLab and Jenkins and kind of keep those as an incubator. And then when you're ready to kind of do a objective analysis on a pipeline for adoption at the enterprise, you can have that superlative engineering team that built their GitLab CI pipeline or their Jenkins CI/CD pipeline or CodeFresh or whatever technology else is being leveraged by that particular team, and build out the reusable pipelines within Harness for adoption enterprise-wide. That being said, I'm getting a little cottonmouth from talking so much so fast. I apologize, but next steps, I'd love for anyone to share your opinions. Big Lebowski happens to be my favorite movie, and this is one of my favorite lines from that movie. Everything I said in this talk, obviously, is just my opinion. So take it for that. Take it for what it's worth. Everything that has made me who I am as an engineer, and as a real advocate for DevOps, and real advocate for cloud adoption and secure cloud adoption at that, is based on opinions that have been formed and continually informed through open connection and communication and collaboration with folks like yourselves. So I really relish the opportunity. This is, so right here is my LinkedIn and my work email, as well as the link to Cloud One Community of Practice, where we always welcome anybody that's interested in contributing to the Cloud One Community of Practice is always more than welcome there as well. And with that, I have nothing left to say. Thank you so much for your time.